My name is Matthew Collins, and I'm 60 years old now. This story takes place 12 years ago, on a snowy Christmas Eve that taught my daughter and me that the greatest gifts we can give have nothing to do with what's wrapped under a tree. I was 48 then, a single father raising my 9-year-old daughter Lily on my own. My wife Rachel had died 3 years earlier from a sudden heart condition that no one had seen coming. One moment she was laughing with us over breakfast, the next she was gone, leaving Lily and me to figure out how to be a family of 2 instead of 3. Those early years of grief and adjustment had been brutal. But by that Christmas Eve, Lily and I had found our rhythm. I worked as an architect for a mid-sized firm, making a comfortable living that allowed us a nice apartment and the ability to provide Lily with a good childhood despite the enormous loss we'd both endured. That particular evening, December 24th, was magical in the way that only Christmas Eve in the city can be. Fresh snow was falling, coating everything in white. Holiday lights twinkled from every storefront. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts and pine. People hurried past with packages and shopping bags, heading home to warm houses and waiting families. Lily and I had spent the afternoon doing our annual Christmas Eve tradition. Last-minute shopping for stocking stuffers, hot chocolate at our favorite cafe, and a walk through the decorated downtown streets to look at all the holiday displays. Lily wore her red winter coat and white scarf, her curly brown hair dusted with snowflakes, her face glowing with the excitement that only children feel on Christmas Eve. We were heading back to our car, my arms full of shopping bags containing the small treasures we'd purchased, when Lily suddenly stopped walking. "Daddy, look." I followed her gaze to a storefront about 20 feet ahead. Sitting on the ground beside the window, partially sheltered from the snow by the building's overhang, was a girl. She looked to be about 12 or 13, with blonde hair that needed washing, and clothes that were inadequate for the winter weather. Beside her sat a wicker basket covered with a cloth, and a small handmade sign that read, "Fresh bread, 3." The girl wasn't actively calling out to passers-by. She just sat there hugging her knees, watching people walk past without seeing her. Occasionally, someone would glance at her, then quickly look away and hurry on. The basket of bread sat untouched, and I could see the girl shivering despite her attempts to stay warm. "Daddy, why is she selling bread on Christmas Eve?" Lily asked, her voice full of confusion and concern. Shouldn't she be home with her family? It was a good question. A child that age, alone on the street on Christmas Eve, was clearly not where she should be. "I don't know, sweetheart. But you're right, it's not normal for someone so young to be out here alone on Christmas Eve. She looks cold and sad. Can we help her?" I looked at the girl again. Really looked this time. Beyond the obvious physical discomfort, there was something in her posture that spoke of resignation, of having learned not to expect kindness from the world. She'd set up her small business of selling bread, but she seemed to have given up hope that anyone would actually stop. "Yes," I said, making a decision. "We can help her." We walked over to where the girl sat. As we approached, she looked up with guarded eyes, the look of someone who'd learned to be wary of strangers. "Hello," I said gently, kneeling down so I wasn't looming over her. "We'd like to buy some bread." The girl blinked, surprised. "You want to buy bread?" "Yes, please." "How much do you have?" She pulled back the cloth covering the basket, revealing perhaps a dozen loaves of homemade bread. They looked simple but well-made, the kind someone had put care into baking. "I have 12 loaves left. $3 each." "We'll take all of them," I said. The girl stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "All of them?" That's $36. "That's fine." I pulled out my wallet and handed her 2 $20 bills. "Keep the change." She took the money with shaking hands. Whether from cold or emotion, I couldn't tell. "Thank you." "Thank you so much." Lily knelt down beside me. "What's your name?" "I'm Lily, and this is my dad." "I'm Sophie," the girl said quietly. "Why are you out here on Christmas Eve?" Lily asked with the directness only children possess. "Don't you have a family?" Sophie's face closed off slightly. "I have a mom. She's sick. We need money for medicine and rent. I bake bread and sell it to help." "Where's your mom now?" I asked gently. "At home, in our room. She's too sick to go out." "Your room? You live in a rooming house?" Sophie nodded. "On Parkside Street. It's all we can afford. Mom used to work 2 jobs. But then she got really sick a few months ago and couldn't work anymore. We're behind on rent. The landlord said if we don't pay by tomorrow, we have to leave. My heart broke. Here was a child, probably around 12 years old, trying to support herself and her sick mother by selling bread on the street on Christmas Eve. While most children her age were home, anticipating presents and celebration, she was sitting in the snow, desperately trying to earn enough money to keep a roof over their heads. "Sophie, how much do you need for the rent?" I asked. She looked down. $800. But I've only made $23 today, even with your money. Nobody wants to buy bread from a kid on the street. They think I'm lying or trying to trick them. I did some quick mental calculation. $800. Less than I'd just spent on Christmas gifts that Lily and I didn't really need. Less than some of the furniture in our apartment had cost. A manageable sum for me, but clearly an impossible mountain for this child and her sick mother. "Sophie, I'd like to help you and your mother. Would you let me do that?" She looked up at me with suspicion mixed with desperate hope. "Help how?" "I'd like to pay your rent, and I'd like to make sure you and your mom have food and whatever else you need." "I can't ask you to do that. It's too much. You don't even know us." "You didn't ask." "I'm offering. And I may not know you, but I know you're a child trying to take care of your sick mother by selling bread in the snow on Christmas Eve. That tells me everything. I need to know." Sophie started crying then, quiet tears that she tried to wipe away quickly. "Why would you help us?" "Nobody helps us. People see me on the street and they look away. Or they think I'm lying. Or they tell me to get a real job like it's that easy." Lily reached out and took Sophie's cold hand. "My daddy helps people. He says that's what you're supposed to do when you can. And we can." I looked at this girl who'd been forced by circumstances to grow up too fast, to shoulder burdens no child should carry. "Sophie, would you take us to where you live?" "I'd like to meet your mother and make sure you both have what you need." She hesitated, clearly torn between pride and desperation. Finally, desperation won. "Okay, it's not far. Just a few blocks." We walked through the snowy streets, Lily carrying the basket of bread while I carried our shopping bags. Sophie led us to a rundown building on Parkside Street, exactly as she'd described. The rooming house had clearly seen better days, with peeling paint and cracked windows, but it was shelter, which was better than nothing. Sophie's room turned out to be exactly that. A single small room with a hot plate, a mini fridge, a bed, and not much else. Her mother, whose name was Grace, lay on the bed under several thin blankets, clearly ill. She looked to be in her mid-30s, but worn down by hardship and sickness. When we entered, Grace tried to sit up, alarm crossing her face. "Sophie, who are these people?" "It's okay, Mom, they're helping us. This man bought all my bread and wants to help with the rent." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand. Why would you?" "Because your daughter is a remarkable young woman who shouldn't have to support you both by selling bread in the snow," I said gently. "And because it's Christmas Eve, and no one should be facing eviction on Christmas Eve." Over the next hour, I learned their story. Grace had been a single mother, working as a housekeeper and a night shift, convenience store clerk to support Sophie. Then she developed a severe autoimmune condition that left her, frequently bedridden and unable to work. They'd burned through their small savings on medical bills. Grace had applied for disability assistance, but the bureaucracy moved slowly, and they'd fallen through the cracks. Sophie had started baking bread, using skills her grandmother had taught her before she died, and selling it on the street to try to keep them afloat. But bread sales rarely covered their basic needs, and they were constantly behind, constantly struggling, constantly one setback away from homelessness. "I try to teach Sophie," Grace said, crying softly. "I try to make sure she does her schoolwork. But sometimes she misses school to take care of me or to sell bread. I'm failing her as a mother." "You're not failing her," I said firmly. "You're doing everything you can with impossible circumstances. But you need help, and there's no shame in accepting it." I made several calls that evening from that cold room. I called the landlord and paid their overdue rent plus 3 months in advance. I called a doctor I knew and arranged for Grace to be seen the day after Christmas. I called a social services organization I'd donated to in the past and arranged for them to help Grace navigate the disability assistance process and access other resources. Then Lily and I went to a nearby grocery store that was still open and bought food, real food, not just bread and ramen noodles. We bought a small space heater for their room. We bought warmer clothes for Sophie and a warm blanket for Grace. When we returned to the rooming house with all the supplies, Sophie and Grace just stared at everything in disbelief. "This is too much," Grace whispered. "We can never repay you. I'm not asking you to repay me. I'm asking you to accept help when you need it, and to pay it forward someday when you're able." "Why?" Sophie asked. "Why are you doing all this? People don't just help strangers like this." I thought about how to answer. 3 years ago, my wife died suddenly. Lily and I were devastated. We had to rebuild our lives from grief. During that time, people helped us. Neighbors brought meals. Friends watched Lily when I couldn't function. My boss gave me time off without question. Those acts of kindness made our survival possible. This is me paying forward the kindness we received. I looked at Sophie specifically. "And you, Sophie, reminded me of something important. You're 12 years old, but you took on the responsibility of caring for your mother without complaint. You sacrificed your childhood to make sure she had medicine and food. That's heroic, and heroes deserve support." That night, Lily and I stayed with Sophie and Grace until late, making sure they had everything they needed. We ate soup together, warmed by the space heater, and talked about their hopes for the future. "I want to be a baker," Sophie said. "A real one with a real bakery?" "I love baking. It makes me feel like I'm creating something good." "Then that's what you should pursue," I told her. "Your bread is excellent. With training and support, you could absolutely run your own bakery someday." When we finally left that evening, Lily was unusually quiet. In the car, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Daddy, Sophie doesn't have any Christmas presents. She doesn't even have a Christmas tree." "I know, sweetheart." "Can we give her some of my presents?" "I have too many anyway. I don't need all of them." I looked at my daughter with pride and love. "That's very generous of you, Lily, but what if we did something even better?" "What?" "What if we invited them to spend Christmas Day with us tomorrow? We have plenty of food, plenty of space, and lots of presents. We could share Christmas with them." Lily's face lit up. "Really? Can we?" The next morning, Christmas Day, I picked up Sophie and Grace and brought them to our apartment. Grace was weak but insisted on coming, saying she couldn't let Sophie miss this. When they saw our Christmas tree and the presents underneath, Sophie's eyes went wide. "This is beautiful," she whispered. Lily immediately took Sophie's hand. "Come on, let's make cookies before we open presents." I'd purchased additional gifts the night before, after leaving Sophie and Grace's room. Nothing extravagant, but thoughtful things. Warm clothes for Sophie, comfortable pajamas for Grace, books and art supplies for Sophie, who I'd learned loved to draw, a journal for Grace, who mentioned she used to write. When present time came, Sophie opened each gift with reverence, clearly not used to receiving anything. When she opened the art supplies, she started crying. "I haven't had real art supplies in 2 years, she said. "I've been drawing on scrap paper with broken pencils I found." Grace cried, too, overwhelmed by kindness she hadn't expected or felt she deserved. That Christmas Day became an annual tradition. Sophie and Grace joined us every Christmas for the next 12 years. I helped Grace finally get approved for disability assistance and connected her with better medical care. Her condition stabilized enough that she could do part-time remote work, supplementing her disability income. Sophie thrived with the stability. She went back to school regularly, graduated high school with honors, and attended culinary school on a scholarship I'd helped her apply for. She specialized in baking and pastry arts, never forgetting her dream of opening her own bakery. Last year, at age 24, Sophie opened Grace and Sophie's, a bakery named for herself and her mother. It's a small but thriving business that employs several other young people from difficult backgrounds, giving them opportunities Sophie remembers not having. She still makes that same simple bread she was selling on the street that Christmas Eve 12 years ago. It's a specialty item on her menu called Christmas Eve bread, and all proceeds from its sales go to local organizations supporting homeless families and single mothers. Lily is 21 now, in college studying social work because, as she says, that snowy Christmas Eve changed her understanding of privilege and responsibility. She volunteers at Sophie's Bakery on weekends and has started a program connecting culinary students with families needing food assistance. Grace's health has stabilized, though she'll never be completely well. She works part-time at Sophie's Bakery, managing the books and greeting customers. She tells everyone who'll listen about the man and little girl who saved them on Christmas Eve, who saw her daughter not as a street kid to be ignored, but as a person worthy of help. We were invisible, she told me recently. People walked past Sophie that night like she wasn't even there. But you and Lily stopped. You saw her, and that changed everything. She's right. We did see Sophie. Or rather, Lily saw her first and asked the question that changed multiple lives. Daddy, why is she selling bread on Christmas Eve? That simple question, asked with childlike concern and compassion, led to everything that followed. It reminded me that noticing matters, that asking questions matters, that caring about strangers matters. I think about what would have happened if we'd walked past Sophie that night like everyone else had. She and Grace would have been evicted on Christmas Day. They would have ended up in a shelter or on the streets. Sophie's education would have been further disrupted. Her dreams of becoming a baker might have died, crushed by the overwhelming weight of poverty and struggle. Instead, because a 9-year-old girl asked a question and a father chose to act on the answer, 2 lives were transformed. Sophie got to pursue her dreams. Grace got the medical care and support she needed. They both got stability, hope, and the knowledge that kindness exists even when you've stopped believing in it. But it transformed us too. Lily learned that privilege comes with responsibility, that we're all connected, that small acts of compassion can have enormous impacts. She learned to notice people others overlook, to ask questions others don't think to ask, to care about strangers others dismiss. And I learned that the best way to honor Rachel's memory wasn't to protect Lily from the world's hardships, but to teach her to engage with them. Compassionately, Rachel had been the most generous person I'd ever known, always noticing people who needed help, always finding ways to assist. Helping Sophie and Grace was something Rachel would have done without hesitation, and in doing it I felt closer to her memory than I had in years. Now, 12 years later, Christmas Eve remains special to all of us. Sophie closes the bakery early that day and bakes her Christmas Eve bread to distribute for free to people on the streets, remembering what it felt like to be the girl sitting in the snow with a basket of bread. Nobody wanted. Lily volunteers with her, and often I join them. All of us looking for the invisible people others walk past. Sometimes we find children like Sophie once was. Sometimes we find families like Sophie and Grace were. Sometimes we just find lonely people who need to know someone sees them, someone cares. This Christmas Eve, the 4 of us, Lily, Sophie, Grace, and I will spend the evening together as we always do, sharing a meal and remembering that snowy night 12 years ago when a little girl asked a question that changed everything. Daddy, why is she selling bread on Christmas Eve? Because she was desperate, because she was trying to save her mother, because she was brave and resourceful and heroic in ways most adults never have to be. And what did I do? I stopped. I listened. I helped. Not because I was particularly virtuous or exceptional, but because my daughter asked a question that demanded an answer, beyond words, an answer that required action. That's the lesson of that Christmas Eve. That noticing matters, that questions matter, that caring about strangers can transform lives in ways we never anticipate. Sophie wasn't invisible that night. She was just unseen by people who'd learned to look away from suffering. But Lily, with the clear eyes of childhood, saw her. And once seen, once truly seen, Sophie couldn't be ignored. That's what changed everything. Not the money, though, that certainly helped. Not the gifts or the medical care or the connections, though all of those mattered. What changed everything was being seen, being valued, being told through actions that your life matters, that your struggles aren't invisible, that someone cares. That's the gift we gave Sophie and Grace that Christmas Eve, and it's the gift they gave back to us. The knowledge that we're all connected, that our actions matter, that choosing compassion over indifference can create ripples that spread far beyond what we can see in the moment. 12 years later, those ripples are still spreading. In the bakery Sophie runs, in the young people she employs, in the families Lily helps through her social work, in the free bread distributed every Christmas Eve to people on the streets, in the lesson that being seen, being valued, being helped can transform everything. All because a little girl asked a question on a snowy,